السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أعزائي طلبة المرحلة الرابعة في قسم اللغة الإنجليزية. In this lecture we are going to complete with the subject of negation. We talked a lot about it in the previous lecture. We defined it and we mentioned several things. So today we are going to continue mentioning things that are related with negation. Starting with alternative negative elements. Concerning alternative negative elements, instead of the verb, another element may be negated. We mentioned in the previous lecture that the major way of making a sentence negative is by adding not to the operator of that sentence. However, this is not the only way for making a sentence negative. We have different ways in which we make that sentence or that clause or word even as negative, as we see here. An honest man would not lie. It could be transformed or negated in another way, like no honest man would lie. I didn't see any birds. We can negate it as I saw no birds. Of course, other ways could be added to this by adding some prefixes to the words, like on, in, im, etc. These prefixes could make that word as a negative one. So these all considered as alternative negative elements or alternative negation. More than one non-assertive form. If a clause contains a negative element, it is usually negative from that point onwards. So the sentence from the point of negation, the word or the let us say the morpheme that indicates negation, it affects the sentence from that point onward. So whatever comes after that negative morpheme or negative word could be considered as negated. This means that the non-assertive forms must normally be used in a place of every as assertive form that would have occurred in the corresponding positive clause. So whatever positive element or form that we use it in the positive sentence, it should be transformed into a non-assertive one. So for example, if we have some, we should substitute it by any or any other non-assertive word. And here we have some examples. I have never traveled anywhere by air yet. So this sentence is considered as negative from the word never onward. And the same is applied for the other sentences that you have here. The non-assertive forms even occur in positive subordinate clause, our clauses following negative in the main clause. So if we have two clauses and the main clause is negated by a negative word or a negative morpheme, the subordinate clause, which is positive, we can use the non-assertive forms, non-assertive words like any, anyone, no, no one, etc. We can use them in the positive clause if if it is used with the main clause that has a negative word or negative morpheme. For example, nobody has promised that any of you will be released yet. So notice here, the main clause is nobody has promised. Nobody has promised. So this is the main clause. This is the main clause, and it contains a negative word, which is nobody. Now, following that, we have a subordinate clause which is after the word that any of you will be released yet. Notice here that this subordinate clause is positive. We don't have any indication that it is a negative one. However, we used two non-assertive forms here, any and yet, as we see here. The same is applied for the next example, that wouldn't deter anyone who had any courage. So the same here. We have a negative clause, or a clause that contains a negative word, and then followed by a positive clause. However, we used a negative form in that positive clause because it is following a negative one. We move now toward the semi-negation, the words that indicate semi-negation, or what we call them as semi-negation words. There are several words which are negative in meaning but not in appearance. So in this section we are dealing with words which are not negative by their form, or let us say apparently they are not negative, but concerning their meaning they indicate negation. These words include the word like seldom and rarely, scarcely, hardly, barely, little, and few. So here, notice here, little and few considered as semi-negation words. However, a little and a few are considered as positive ones, not semi-negative words. And finally, we have the word only. Now, if someone asks about the difference between little and a little on one side, and the few and a few on the other side, if we dig deep in their meanings, we can say that few means a small number of something which is not enough to do something. Few means a few number of something which is not enough to do something. So it gives us a negative meaning, a negative impression. On the other hand, a few means a small number of something, however, it is enough to do something. So it gives us an indication that it is positive. The same thing is applied with little and a little. We know that little and a little are used with non-countable nouns. So little means a small amount of something which is not enough to do something. And on the other hand, a little means a small amount of something that is enough to do something. So this is the difference between little and a little, and few and a few. So why we consider these words as semi-negation words? Let us see the following things. They have the following similarities to the ordinary negative items. So they are similar with negative items, with negative words or morphemes in this way. They are followed by non-assertive rather than assertive forms. So we use non-assertive forms after these words rather than the assertive. I seldom get any sleep. So here we use the word any with seldom. We did not use the word some here because seldom is semi-negative word. The same is applied with the following examples. I have spoken to hardly anyone who disagrees with me, etc. Number 2, when in a pre-subject position, so when we put these words before the subject, what happens? Some of them can cause subject operator inversion. So if we use these words before the subject, we are going to put the operator before the subject of that sentence. For example, rarely does a crime pay so well as Mr. John seems to think. Scarcely ever has the British nation suffered so much oblique. The same thing with the following examples. Number 3, and the final point that we have today is they are followed by positive rather than negative tag questions. So when we have a tag question, we are going to use a positive tag question rather than negative one. For example, she scarcely seemed to care. Does she? So from that, we can conclude that these words are highly similar to the negative words or morphemes that we have mentioned previously. Thank you very much and see you in the next lecture. Bye.